Kent Drummond will be talking about the shockingly similar visions of two museum exhibits, BodyWorlds and the exhibit currently at the Denver Art Museum, the Yves Saint Laurent exhibit. Kent Drummond, our last speaker, was born in the Midwest. He obtained his BA in English from Stanford University and MBA in marketing from the Kellogg School of Management at Northwestern University, and his doctorate in communication from the University of Texas at Austin. He deals essentially in arts marketing, which I personally find very, very interesting, and it should be interesting for those who are patrons of this museum as well, and others in Jackson, I might add. He has taught at the University of Wyoming for 22 years. I might also add he is married to Susan Ehrenstein, who spoke on Monty Python at the last Saturday University in March. So I'm certain that they have a lot of fun going to performances of every kind, as Kent has noted he is interested in. He has some interesting research interests, the juxtaposition of high culture and popular culture. And indeed, he has published recent articles on subjects such as the influence of Celtic mysticism on the music of Led Zeppelin, how walking tours of Paris helped extend the shelf life of the book, The Da Vinci Code, and finally, his reflections on the life of Elvis, inspired by a tour of Graceland. So I think we will really enjoy his presentation today. Thank you very much for joining us, all of you. And following this, we'll have our lunchtime roundtable discussion immediately following, and we hope you will stay because I know Jim McNutt, who is moderating that session, has lots of ideas how to thread these conversations together that we've had this morning, in addition to the three professors. So thank you very much, and welcome, Kent.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for that nice introduction, and thank you to the great hospitality that we've been shown by Uma and Emmy, and Marcia and Allie. It's great to be here. It's great to hear my colleagues speak because I don't have a chance to hear them, and I love to be in their classes. Bill is my backdoor neighbor, love him, and he's made the neighborhood so much better, Bill, by moving there. Thank you. You know, the first two talks may have been a little bit depressing, but I'm here to save the day because it all comes down to marketing, okay? It's all about marketing. Bill, I can solve your problem. And Bill, if I had my way, you'd be a millionaire. You'd be famous. Allie, if I had my way, you'd have your own dance company. You'd be a star. Bill T. Jones would be our money. And, you know, I'm here to make artists famous, so I love the arts of all kinds. But mostly I love pop art and I love high art. And so I love it when high culture meets pop culture and you've got a blockbuster, like the one right behind me. Now, does anyone know what that is? It's BodyWorlds. And BodyWorlds is this exhibit of dead bodies. Now, you tell me, corpses preserved, put in these weird positions, and people are lining up outside the museum to see them? That's marketing. All right? How did that happen? Well, I'm here to explain to you how it happened, and this is the kind of research that I do. Because what I then do is say, okay, based on that, what can we say about the future? What can we say about other ideas that people have that may be a hit? All right. It has to do with ghosts. And what do I mean by ghosts? Well, I mean metaphorical ghosts. Ghosts in our culture, ghosts in the past of these people. And see, from a marketer's point of view, there aren't any good or bad ghosts. It all depends on how you market them. The good ghosts you want to bring to the fore, you want to capitalize on those ghosts. The bad ghosts you want to keep in the dungeon, in the closet, and you don't want to let them out. But that's what marketing's about. It's about controlling people's perceptions. The reality doesn't really matter. It's what people think, and to what extent can we control what people think, okay? All right. Can you see why I'm popular, my classes are? Because people need marketing. You all need marketing. All right. So who's this guy? I mean the one on the right. Günther von Hagens, he's German, an amazing man. He's brilliant, technically brilliant. He invented and has patented a process whereby the human body, after death, can be preserved in perpetuity, or as he says, for didactic eternity. He is a genius. He's an enfant terrible. He upsets people. He's a maverick. In his anatomy classes in Heidelberg, he didn't like what the professor said. He didn't agree with them. He was always calling them out. When he was asked to preserve a kidney, he took centuries of preserving and said, you know, that's not right, because the paraffins around the kidney, why don't you inject something into the kidney and preserve it that way? And so that's what he did. And he came up with something next to him that resembles him, and you can see the resemblance. He's taken ownership over these creatures here. And as a result, he's made tens of millions of dollars. He's owned it, and we've owned it as well. Instead, he's chosen to draw upon another tradition, not that scary kind of macabre sort of relationship, ghoulish, where you take body parts and put them all together, although that's what he does. But rather this tradition. You might recognize the style of painting, the artist. It's Rembrandt, the anatomists. And these guys around, they're like Dutch masters crowded around a body. And so they're surgeons, doctors, the kind of power elite of their day. And this is the ghost that Günther wants to trade on. And this is what he has traded on. The reason he wears that hat is that they wore these hats. And it's a fedora. He wears the smock of the Dutch masters, and that's what he wants to be associated with. So it's a high culture turn that's a way, it's in the name of science. Now here's the process, and I'm sorry, it's right before lunchtime, but this is it. So I feel like this sometimes in the morning, don't you? It takes a while. But here he is at work, all right? He's wearing the hat, but he's lifting a body out of a silicone bath, and he's about to inject it. It's a very complicated process. It takes a genius to come up with this, and this is what he does to preserve, say, a heart. There's a preparation, this is just with one organ, and then a dehydration, replacing an acetone with silicone, and then finally a hardening. So this is a process, and he's still tweaking it today. It's taken 40 years. He's mastered it, and he's patented it. And it enables him to move and show any part of the body from any angle in any way. And so the body achieves this plasticity that's never been done before, all right? Now because of that, he can take it on the road and look at the result, okay? You've got this body, this corpse, though interestingly, you know, I think of Sunny D, that fruit concoction that you pour your kids because it's so cheap. You know, that figure right there bears about as much relation to a human body as Sunny D does to actual fruit juice. There's not much. There's not much there left. So it is a kind of deception because there's just a lot of different things that are at work there. He's painted it. He's made a lot of aesthetic choices that get to this, but look at that reaction of those kids. That's what you want in a museum, isn't it? That kind of engagement and that kind of rapt. I mean, these kids are, what are they feeling, do you think? Partly a little bit of fear, but there's this guy, and look at his pose. He's leaning out towards them. He's engaging them. The eyeballs are intact. I mean, these are all choices that Günther has made to engage the museum goers. And the kids are scared and curious all at the same time. And what has he got? He's got a basketball. So he contextualizes it into our everyday life. He weaves it in. All right? He's not done. In fact, the whole place is filled with bodies like these. How many people have been to this exhibit or one like them? Okay, great. Okay, look at that one. One hand, a skateboarder. It's interesting. And you can look at it from all angles. And these are not dead people doing dead things, because my 13-year-old says, Dad, we're going to have a zombie apocalypse. You know, these people are coming after us. But when he gets into this exhibit, it's cool. They're doing all this stuff that he likes to do. You can see his body. He plays a rock guitar in one of these things. And of course, when he does this, then he activates the muscles that are engaged when you do this activity. And so, you know, it's a great learning tool. And in the end, that's what he sees his job as. He's a medical socialist, so there are some socialists out there, Bill, who claim that, you know, we got to share the information. And I want all of you to be responsible for your own health. And that's his philosophy, that he wants to show everybody just what is up with the body and how it works. But by doing this, I mean, these things have never been done before. All right? You can do it with animals too, and horse and rider. And it's pretty stunning when you see these things. They're huge. They take, you know, it takes about 2 years to make one of these things. He's got a whole factory and a whole staff working to make these things. They have exported the process around the world, and so that you can, if you do this, of course you have to pay him, but you're trained by him to do it the right way. Look at this one. The death spiral, right, from figure skating. So we have, and of course you can do this with any figure. And by doing this, he's got men, women, both. So he's got that whole chemistry going. He's got these figures falling in love with each other. And sometimes he goes a little too far. And he has made 2 figures actually having sex. I didn't show that one. I thought about it, and my wife told me not to. That's controversial. But, you know, these things, they bring to mind all sorts of other issues that you have to think of if you're going to have this exhibit in your city. What do you have to be concerned about if you're going to show something like this? Public reaction. And different groups that suddenly might come into play, other ghosts in our culture that might surface from religious groups, educational groups. So how do you prevent that? Well, I had a chance to sit down with Bridget Coughlin, who's the Vice President for Education at the Denver Museum of Nature and Science, where this came. She's a big, big fan of Gunter's work. She herself is a biochemist. She gets just how amazing this is, what he's done. She says this is the Olympics of anatomy. This guy is the world's greatest anatomist, and he's brilliant. So she's been over to his place in Germany where this takes place. And because of that relationship, she got the exhibit twice. So it's been to Denver in 2006 and in 2010. You may have seen it there. I saw it both times, went through the exhibit, observed, surveyed people afterwards, talked to her, talked to like the custodial staff, got their reactions about the whole thing. It's a blockbuster by any measure. It's been seen by over 30 million people. And as I said, made him lots of money. But he himself doesn't care about that much. He cares about educating all of us to take responsibility for our own bodies. And he'll isolate different systems in the body, the nervous system, the skeletal system, the digestive system. He'll show you a healthy one, and then he'll show you a diseased one. He'll show you a healthy set of lungs. He'll show you smoker's lungs, and you make that decision. And as I've interviewed people after they come out of the exhibit, some are extremely moved. Some are extremely, they realize for the first time, this is exactly how my father died. This is what happened to him when he wanted to stop smoking and he wouldn't. This is what happened. And now I'm committed. I'm not going to end up like he did. My mom had this weight problem, and you know, that's what her knee looked like, that joint. I can't let the same thing happen to me. So people are having these conversion experiences, a lot of people. Interestingly, some people can't take it in the exhibit. Some people don't go because they're a little turned off by the prospect of it. Marcia's one of them. So she decided not even to go. And there are, you know, say about 10% of the population who feels that way. We won't get them in the door. But for those who do come in, they're in for a very powerful experience. Interestingly, the men turn out to be more squeamish than the women. And the custodial staff reported that on average, 3 men a day faint in the exhibit as they go through. They think they can take it, but they can't. So the women, I don't know. They're tougher, maybe. I try to get a shot here of the kind of larger context. As you walk through the exhibit, it's not just the body themselves, but it's other production values that make this thing really, it's a high-class operation. I mean, everything's draped in black velvet. There's track lighting spotlighted on these figures. They almost have a spiritual aspect to them. And it's also augmented by lots of posters and photographs of people from all over the world as they age and go through the process. And then it's augmented with a lot of famous quotes from Khalil Gibran or the Dalai Lama or, you know, world leaders and philosophers. Okay, so it becomes, it's a very elevated experience, all right? It's not just about these corpses that a lot of people think of it as. So it's a much broader and a much more sophisticated kind of presentation of the anatomy. Okay, it calls us to higher things. But here's what it can also do. If you start showing something like this, again, you've got another ghost to overcome. If you're going to show the very beginning of life and a pregnant woman like this, which he does in the exhibit, you're going to run into some problems, right? What Bridget had to do in Denver was convene a whole panel of religious authorities from Jewish, Christian, Muslim faiths. Together they sat down and she said, this is what this exhibit is. Are you ready for this? And some of them expressed, you know, real reservations about it. And she explained why this was coming, what its real purpose is, and that there would be warnings, and that this part of the show would be off to the side, so that if you went there, you chose to. And so some people do choose to go into this room, which deals with the very beginning of life, others not. But you can see, and also the aesthetic choices. I mean, he hasn't learned yet, nobody has, how to preserve eyeballs in this exhibit. So those eyeballs are totally artificial. He's put them in there. He could leave them out. But if you leave those out, you suddenly have a very different relationship, don't you? Because you can no longer relate to that figure. So this really, and people say, oh, it's about dead bodies. It's not a celebration of death. It is a celebration of life in his eyes. But to do that, he's got to make certain choices as to how he presents these bodies to make it work. So it's about connections. It's not about disconnection. Because disconnection gives you that fear of the zombie effect. The connection says, these aren't dead, but these are doing live things. What about that one? Now you're crossing the line. This is his latest creation, and actually his last one. As it turns out, Gunnar von Hagens has Parkinson's disease. It's advanced, and it's rapidly advancing. He no longer works with bodies. He himself will no longer be around and can't do this work. Fortunately, lots of people can. And he decided this is his last creation, that this would be the crucifixion. And it's a sense of, okay, this science bleeding over into art. And he sees himself now not as an anatomist, but as an artist. And this is his final work, okay? And again, a lot of outcry from people who call him Dr. Frankenstein. He's used to the controversy, and he courts it to some extent, and he knows that helps sell tickets. But in the end, He's got a lot of integrity, and he stood up for what he believes, and he feels he's achieved a lot of what he set out to do. And having interviewed people who go to the museum, I have to say he has, because people are much more mindful. Having seen this exhibit, it's powerful. It's powerful. Here's a sense of promotion about it. These are huge banners that are often strung across the museum. And so the awareness is there for anyone who's just driving by. A lot of people have already heard about it. Word of mouth, very powerful, and people are already interested in it. But for those who aren't, you see the posters all over in social media as well. And it's all over the world. So he has tours running concurrently, and they focus on different things. So this is the cycle of life. It's going to take you from birth, middle age, death. Another one is the story of the heart. And he's going to have different emphases, but the core experience is always the same, and then he focuses on a different aspect. So the question for a lot of museum directors is how often do we have this thing come through? What's the saturation level for our public? You know, how often to have it? In Denver, they decided, okay, 4 years was long enough. It's time for it to come back. When he has the next show, will Denver get it again? That'll be up to Bridget. We'll see what she's thinking. Here's the other complication. This is the original show, but there are about 10 knockoff shows that are touring the world because they make so much money. There's one on permanent display at the Luxor in Las Vegas. Some people have been there. It's right next to the Titanic exhibition, which also makes a lot of money. But it's on permanent display there. Now, the thing about those is their production values aren't as high. They can't do his process exactly because that's illegal, and he's taken him to court. And when you go through there, the feeling is somewhat different. If you don't pull this off in just the right way, it becomes not only tacky, but a little bit ghoulish. You know, a little bit, this is weird. It doesn't feel the same. I went to one in a discount mall in Golden, Colorado, okay? I heard about it, and I had to go because I had to compare. So I've been to like 4 of these things. That one, okay, it was in the outlet mall, granted. And but it's amazing how different that makes you feel. The ceiling was lower. There weren't black velvet drapes. They couldn't afford it. There really wasn't the track lighting. It was that iridescent Walmart lighting. And live people don't look good in that, have you noticed? And, you know, and gone were the quotes, those elevating quotes from Gandhi and spiritual leaders to transport us beyond. And what you got was something truly macabre. And where did the bodies come from? And that's a huge question, and that's been a scandal. You may have heard about it. Where these bodies came from at the discount mall was from China. And they were Chinese miners. They were placed in a mass grave, and that's where they got the bodies, okay? Many of them had been in poor health anyway. The techniques were much less sophisticated, and the shading of the skin, all the stuff, was very unpleasant. So you came out of that with a very different impression. The bodies were starting to disintegrate, so there was a little pile of artery material down at the bottom of the casement. You know, it was just, I wanted to get out of there. So I hung around at the exit as well. And for people who hadn't gone to the real thing, the BodyWorlds exhibit, they were kind of okay with it. I mean, they weren't converted and they didn't feel as strongly about it as the ones who'd gone to BodyWorlds. But if the people had gone to BodyWorlds and gone to this one, they were upset. And they were actually offended and said, you know, I want my money back. I thought this was that one we saw at that museum in Denver. And it's not at all. This was not as good. I don't like this one. They didn't always know why, but you know, it does matter. So that's what I say about marketing. Marketing's in the details. Marketing is saying you've got to get everything just right. Because if you fail, and people notice, they don't always know why, but it adds up. All right. Now, how much do you like BodyWorlds and how committed are you to its success? Well, the ultimate. If you really got carried away by the exhibit, you yourself can donate your body for what we call plastination, okay? And at the end, there is a form and a contract that you can sign, if you've truly been blown away and you yourself want to be put on display, then you can will your body to do this, all right? And some people do. About 12,000 people have done this so far. 10,000 from Europe and about 2,000 here. And you know, they do so for all sorts of reasons. Some people because they look so healthy and they want to be put on display, so they're kind of narcissistic. And then others because they haven't taken care of their body. And I've read some of the reasons in the contracts. And some say, I've lived kind of a dissolute life, and it's almost over, and I want to teach people what that gets you. And it's very interesting, the different perspectives. So it's moving. Let's go back to this one. This now, because of the relationship the Denver Museum has with Gunter's work, they've now been given, this is called a plastinate. This is a full plastinate body on permanent display in their health exhibit. Because another ghost that people have to worry about, especially when it comes to health and health care, is being preached at. So you've got to do this, this is good for you, this isn't. We've had a lot of that, and people are tired of it. And Bridget is well aware of that at the Denver Museum. And as she talks about museum work and how we involve museum goers, it's no longer enough to sort of just preach at people and say, well, this is the way it is, and this is what you need to do and should do. But it's much more important to make the museum experience interactive, you know, and to let people know that they have someone there maybe at the museum who's on their side, who's with them, and who's going to go maybe on a journey with them. So if you go to that museum, you're going to see a permanent exhibit called Exhibition Health. And that is an actual idea that they had for about 12 people to actually climb Mount Evans, which is a mountain. It's a 14er there. Maybe some of you climbed it. You can see it from the museum. They actually filmed, it was a 2-day process of the whole crew going up. But here's the thing, those 12 people were all different walks of life. Some were young, some were old, male, female, black, white. And when you walk into that exhibit, you can choose a buddy to go up to Mount Evans with. And you sign in, you swipe this card, and you choose the buddy. Well, guess what happens? Whom do people choose? The person who's most like them. So I chose the middle-aged white guy, Ted, to go up with, the mountain with. And at each stage of the Mount Evans, you see what Ted is going through and his body is going through. This is a perfect example of interaction and having someone to kind of go through an experience with. This is what museums have to do these days to get people in. It's just not enough to say, okay, to tell them in a very didactic way. And so she has this plastinate now, and when people see it, they're going to remember the exhibit that was here, and it's going to connect. So we're talking about connections at all levels. All right, and then the ultimate contribution. Okay, so this was a story about technology triumphing over our ignorance and our fear, educating people, and making a lot of money in the process. So these museum shows are touring the world over, and the fact that there are a lot of knockoffs means there's still a lot of money to be made. But I want to compare this one with another ghost in the museum. And it's a very different kind of ghost, all right? It's an exhibit that's on now at the Denver Art Museum, Yves Saint Laurent, the Retrospective, okay? Let me show you the logo. Here it is, these wonderful bright colors. One of the final dresses that Yves Saint Laurent made, it's called the Parisian Rose. It is a giant satin bow on the back of a dress. Brilliant color, amazing design. And in the little brochure that you're given comes this promotion. It says Paris, Madrid, Denver. Okay? Paris, Madrid, Denver. What's that all about? Well, more about that later. Here's this ghost. Who's this guy? Well, it's Yves Saint Laurent. I'm going to call him YSL for short. And what's he doing here? Another creature, another creator. So the creature is the woman on the left. He's the creator. All right? It's similar to Günter von Hagens and his creation. It's very different. But look at that relationship. I mean, look at him smiling at her. And she's not looking back at him. What's she looking at? Well, she's looking at his creation for her, his design, his dress for her. And she's got a glass of champagne. And she feels like $1 million. And she's going to have to spend about $1 million too to buy this thing. This is a wonderful picture. I love it because it shows why he was worth hundreds of millions of dollars by the time he died in 2008. Because he knew how to make a woman feel like a princess. He had a famous quote that said, "The ultimate dream of a woman is to be held in the arms of a man who loves her forever. But for those women who have not yet achieved that dream, I am here." And he was there. I'm here. That takes some moxie, doesn't it? He knew exactly what his role was in a woman's life. That he wasn't going to make love to her, because in fact he was gay, was attracted to men, had a long and very prosperous relationship with Pierre Berger, his business collaborator and partner. But he was going to dress you and to clothe you, to adorn you in a way that would make you more beautiful. That's why fashion matters, because it does control our lives in a lot of ways, and it certainly influences our lives now more than ever. So he mattered, and it continues to matter. What this exhibit does, when you go through it, it's on through July 8th, and I encourage everyone to go. Marcia, I know you've been. Anyone else yet? Get down there, because it is fabulous in ways that you would not expect. Now, the target market for this one, very different than the one from BodyWorlds, right? BodyWorlds gets in everybody. It's also a great date kind of thing, because the guys can go and show off. I mean, there's so many guys who are into the body, into their bodies, and they can look and say, and you see them pointing out different parts of the body to their girlfriends, and they feel very engaged with a museum exhibit. How great is that? How hard is that to do? And there's so many pre-med, pre-vet physical therapy people. Those schools are bursting now with applications. So that taps into that market. This market, much more specialized. Who do you think the target market is? It's women aged 40 on up, okay? Rather affluent, well-heeled, well-coiffed women. You know, here we are. And when you go, that's about 90% of who's there, okay? The occasional husband dragged along by the woman. He's there reluctantly. But as I talked to them after the exhibit, the guys were as excited as the women because they didn't know. They had no idea of this man's effect and how he got that effect. How did he get that effect? Here he is in the 50s, at a very young age. At the age of 21, he was the head of the House of Dior. Christian Dior died suddenly of a heart attack. He was left to be the main designer. Pierre Cardin, also there. Pierre Cardin is still alive. And here's the first picture you see of him when you walk in. He's a man of mystery, okay? Taken by Irving Penn, very famous photographer. Someone who's withdrawn, someone very shy, uncomfortable around people, who preferred the comfort of his atelier, his studio, to create, but who at the same time wasn't above getting in front of the camera. If he had to market something, he would do it. But he was also an expert at reading the culture. Okay? What you get to do is see his studio. This is a recreation of it with the actual artifacts in it, and what he called his aesthetic ghosts. So he actually uses the term ghosts. Here's someone who's inspired by Madame Bovary, by La Traviata, by Anna Karenina, and yes, some designers like Coco Chanel, but Marlene Dietrich, Marlon Brando. So again, invoking in a similar way to Günter von Hagens, high culture icons that he's drawing upon, okay, from literature, Proust, Oscar Wilde. These are his inspirations and his aesthetic ghosts, as Nietzsche would say. And they're all here, and can see them all. And so you feel like you're watching him maybe create something. And what did he create? Well, this doesn't have a lot of definition. But from the period about 1964 to 68, he turned the fashion world on its ear by suddenly liberating women. So it wasn't enough to caress women with these outfits, but it was suddenly to show their power and to liberate the kind of power he felt they always had, but had never been shown before. What he observed about men is that when men put on clothes, they became bigger and stronger, more powerful than they were without clothes. When women put on clothes, they tended to diminish. They became more feminine, in a traditional sense, more passive, less powerful. He wanted to reverse that. And that was his huge contribution in the 60s into the 70s. So here's a pantsuit with a tie, pinstripe, a fedora, and it was shocking to the fashion world that you would be dressed like this. All right? Safari jacket, okay? This was on the cover of Vogue. This is a huge controversy. I mean, for now, it seems just normal. What's the big deal? But to have that in the 60s, this famous model, laced that way, dressed like that with a rifle, unheard of, right? That's a commentary on colonialism, on the aggressiveness of women, on the sensuality of women. She's in control here with that lace. She determines how far down it goes. It's comfortable to wear, and it's a little bit threatening. This is the most famous of all, the tuxedo, which he would design now. In every collection would have a tuxedo outfit. Pants, but notice, I mean, it's just not a man's jacket. It's tailored to a woman. And again, it was shocking when it first came out. We take it for granted now. This was the first time it had been done. He was making a commentary. And, you know, what do our artists do in our time? They both reflect the time, but they also push it. They push it forward. And that's what he did. Here's the jumpsuit. Who wore jumpsuits before women did? Well, those guys who jumped out of planes, made of really tough canvas-like fabric. Now, with new technology, and again, technology plays a big role. We never had fabric like this. He had a way of producing it, tailoring it as a jumpsuit. Now, those weren't the only things, and what he was especially known for was haute couture, or high fashion, and these are on display in abundance. There are 200 gowns and creations at this exhibit. The colors you would not believe, the workmanship you would not believe. And there are videos telling the story of his staff who would literally just about die for him. They would do anything. If it was the night before a show and something was out of place, he'd say, you got to rip it out, and you got to stay up all night and get it right before you hit the runway. And they would. But they were his family, and they would do anything for him, and he for them. Because the workmanship to do this with these materials, astounding. The colors, I mean, he did a lot with black, but his homes were in Marrakesh, outside of Paris. He was very shy. He said, when I went to Marrakesh, I discovered color, and the exhibit is filled with these swatches of color that he had to work with. And these are some of his last designs, some of the simplest, in chiffon. They're just hanging. And again, the production values in this exhibit, very high. Nothing is out of place. He could also go ethnic, but he didn't make it look like a costume. He somehow made it look authentic. And these are Moroccan. He actually didn't like to travel, and so his inspiration came from books, articles, movies, one after the other, gorgeous. It's also influenced by the art of the time, right? Whether it was contemporary art or past. And you can see two examples right here. This is color blocks of Mondrian, right? So he's trading on that, and that was a huge dress in the 60s. But then he's going back to Van Gogh with the irises there. Picasso, Goya, nothing was beyond. But it took the aesthetic vision, and again, similar to Von Hagen's, an aesthetic vision with the technical expertise to pull it off. He had both. Also, this famous dress, if you're a fan of Belle de Jour, the film, that Catherine Deneuve wore, the little black dress. So she was a housewife by day and something very different by night. He designed her wardrobe for that. That's just hanging in the exhibit. You get to go into her closet, into Catherine Deneuve's closet, because she was his muse, inspired her, and many women did, but he designed a lot for her. So you're taken into this, and again, you feel a part of it. It's a very interactive exhibit. Well, there he is. And as I say, he's not above marketing himself when the situation required. So when he launched a perfume for men, this is a very controversial photo in the early 70s, showing him naked with his glasses on. It's a very androgynous look and this kind of ethereal light in the back. Well, when it hit, it caused such an uproar, and the sales of this perfume skyrocketed. Right? It worked. He was withdrawn, and I think that captures his shyness, but he was ruling fashion at this time. And you know you've made it when Andy Warhol does a portrait of you, right? There's all the trappings of an Andy Warhol portrait. And so, you know, he had his own ghosts, and there were ghosts of inspiration on the one hand, but terrible depression, dependence on prescription medications, too much drinking, a lot of cocaine. All the stuff that you'd expect of someone from the fashion world, 60s, 70s, 80s. He survived all of that. And he was ruling it. So those are ghosts you don't hear in the exhibit, right? And another big ghost you don't hear is that this was his relationship to high fashion, okay? But where he really made his money was in what we call pret-a-porter, right? Ready to wear. And he was the most successful ready-to-wear designer of that entire period, because that's where you make your money. Haute couture gets you the name and the validation, but it doesn't make a lot of money because there just aren't enough women doing that. And now there are even fewer. So he was smart enough, and with his partner, Pierre Berger, to market into the ready-to-wear lines in the upper-end department stores and make the millions and millions of dollars that way. But they don't mention that so much at this exhibit. Why not? Because we're talking about that higher end, that art end, and by commercializing and generalizing, you dilute that cachet, which, you know, was a criticism when he did it. But it made it affordable to more women. All right, as you near the end of the exhibit, you met with two amazing scenes. On the left, you're met with all the tuxedos he designed in every collection, and there are about 40 of them, 4 stories of these mannequins. And so it's a wall of all black with just a few glimpses of white and accessories. And so it's just amazing. This thing just comes right at you. And it's, again, very powerful. It's similar to BodyWorlds. I think when you show the body this way, it can't help but speak to you. So that's on one side. And then on the other, it's what is called the last ball, okay? And it's a final farewell to all of his haute couture creations, and it's modeled after the grand staircase at the Paris Opera, the old Paris Opera. And if you've ever been there, you know that it's about looking at other people and yourself being seen. So you're very self-conscious when you walk up that staircase. And this is what people used to look like at the opera. They don't anymore. They used to. And so this is it's a very nostalgic note that this exhibit ends on. It's high fashion that no longer exists. It's a world that we say goodbye to. And yet it's still relevant. And there's the farewell. This is the last thing you see in the collection. And it's on the back of a mannequin, and then it's over. Now, how's this thing marketed? Well, you take that bow, put it across the skyline of Denver, and you've got a great promotional poster, don't you? I love this. Because it's saying, well, you know, what's the perception of Denver for the rest of the world? Well, it's the C word, Cowtown, comes to mind, right? But Denver hates that. I mean, they're still trying to say, all right, we've arrived, we've made it. We're not the Cowtown you think we are. There's always that doubt, right? The rest of the world is always saying that. So they got the Democratic National Convention about 4 years ago, and that was huge. Well, they're likening this to that. I mean, it's that big to have this exhibit. It's the only place in North America where it's going to be. So it's a huge opportunity, and it's a huge coup. I haven't quite figured out how it happened. Jim has his ideas about how the new director at DAM, Christoph Heinrich, got the exhibit here. He is from Europe, and Pierre Berger, who controls everything YSL related, there's probably a connection there that enabled him to get it to come to Denver. But these fashion exhibits are all the rage right now. We had Alexander McQueen at the Met last year. It was a blockbuster. What they're hoping for is the same thing will happen to Denver, and that Denver will be a resort, a destination resort for a lot of people from New York, from San Francisco, LA, come to Denver for the weekend. Lots of package deals to promote this thing. So stay at the Ritz-Carlton, then go to this exhibit, hand in hand. You got to have a Ritz-Carlton to do it, right? And as a couple years ago, Denver has one. Got a Four Seasons too. So they couldn't do that before they had the hotels. What about the venue itself? Well, here is the Daniel Libeskind designed Hamilton Wing, so controversial when it was built. And they've got another ghost to overcome here. When they built this thing, they thought it in itself would be a blockbuster and people would come. They thought 1 million visitors a year would come to this. Well, they didn't. This hasn't been that popular, and the numbers haven't been released, but it hasn't been 1 million a year. What they've done, and this is the older part, as they show it here, of the museum, is a fortress-like structure where the main entrance was. Now they've moved the main entrance over here, and they want that exhibit to really show it off, and they're still hoping they'll get those people. Now here was opening night at the Yves Saint Laurent show. So Pierre Berger is in the middle, and he is the executor of the estate. So he's got like 5,000 objects. That's the archive. So he can dole out this thing for years. We'll see more shows. They'll be in other places. They're making a lot of money. That's Betty Catreau, who is one of YSL's inspirations, another muse, and that's the curator of the exhibit. They were all on hand and all very pleased with how the exhibit was staged and how it was promoted. So they're very happy. It was a black tie affair. The mayor came out, Mayor Hancock, gave a speech about how glad he was that this exhibit had come. I thought, you know, it's a long way from those calls to the escort service, to the black tie event. But anyway, you got that, didn't you? Okay. Now, how else do we promote? A luncheon, okay? Luncheon, fashion week, wine tasting, the outreach to the community is endless, and it's a commercial venture. So we're going to have a lot of tie-ins with commercial and retail outlets, and here are a lot of ladies enjoying a lecture from Pierre Berger about his memories of YSL. We're going to have Project Runway, young people who are involved in fashion. They're going to get up there designing based on this. So we're getting young people involved. They also have a studio next to this exhibit, so you can actually design your own stuff. You can walk on a runway and be videotaped about that. They're having designers come in. So lots of very smart opportunities for promoting this event. And finally, this is how it ends. This is his last show. He was dying of brain cancer. He was barely able to stand up. And so all the models who had ever worked for him joined him on the runway. There's Catherine Deneuve off to the right. She's in tears. I'm not sure who that is. Looks kind of like Brooke Shields. Imam in back. He was the first to use ethnic models in his work. Black women were not allowed on the runway. He said, they're beautiful. And so it was a great farewell. And that's how it ended. And this show commemorates that moment in history where he changed fashion forever in ways that we take for granted now. But it's still a really relevant show, and it's one that matters, and it's definitely worth seeing. All right. In the end, what are the takeaways? If you're a museum president or a curator or an exhibitor, you've got to know the culture, all right? You've got to read the culture that we're in, contemporary culture. You've got to have your finger on the pulse of culture to know where the ghosts might be, all right? Where might they crop up all of a sudden, for better or for worse? The good ones are opportunities for you. The bad ones are landmines. They could blow up on your face. You better be ready. And Bridget did a great job of that by involving the religious leaders in advance. Secondly, production values matter. And you've got to get the highest production values you possibly can to pull these exhibits off. Otherwise, you know, you're not going to believe you're in the grand staircase at the Paris Opera. But when you're there, you actually do believe that, don't you? You see these beautiful dresses coming down and you're just engulfed in this world, and it's fantastic. Multimedia provides so many more opportunities for us to do that now than we ever could. And finally, the outreach in the community. How does this relate? Where's the value? And we're in tough times right now, so where's the value to all your stakeholders? And I'd ask the question Ronald Reagan asked, are you better off now than you were 2 hours ago? When you started that exhibit, have you learned something? Have you changed? Are you somehow transposed, transfigured into something more? And I think that all of us believe that we are as a result of some arts experience, but we've got to communicate that to all of our stakeholders, whoever they might be. And if we do, Bill Downs will be a millionaire, and we will have lines out the door for this museum. All right, thank you.
We have time for a couple of questions.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of the takeaways for other industries other than the museum, and it seems to me that one of them is to present yourself as you want to be, as you would like people to see you rather than as you may be now.
Absolutely. And that is what marketing teaches, you know. It's a lot about impression management, you know, for better or for worse. And you're trying to control people's reaction to you, okay? Insofar as you can. Now, people, you know, that's not going to be 100% foolproof. People are going to believe what they want to believe for various reasons. But insofar as you can, yes, it's a lot about self-presentation. And what museums have to be aware of is that their place of relevance, and Jim, you were talking about this last night, to everybody. I mean, everyone should find relevance in this experience here, in Bill's plays, in dance, in opera. You know, it still matters. What?
Ducks?
Absolutely. That's right. And I can solve your problems, Ben. Come on. Yeah. It is about marketing. But sooner or later, we get around to hiring the marketer, right? For, you know, either as a consultant or as a staff member. Yeah. Because the marketer is the one who reaches out in the community and finds out where people are at. You know, what do they want? What are they concerned about? How do they see your museum, your institution currently? And where are the opportunities? So how can you move? How can you change their perceptions? Yeah. So it's all about that. But it's a whole process. But it begins with figuring out what people currently think of you. And then if you want to move the dial, you got to move it a little bit. Yeah.
Did Saint Laurent revolutionize marketing in the fashion industry?
Yes, he absolutely did. But interestingly, you know, that's not a ghost that they want to put forward. You know, they could, but this particular angle is, you know, this high art guy who inspired and who, you know, did change a generation. But as far as marketing, they downplay that a little bit because it's at odds with that high art vision that they want to communicate. But to me, I mean, they very easily could have, and I don't think it would have taken it away. But they chose not to. But then again, that leaves room for another exhibit, right? YSL, the marketer. So we could see that in a few years. So you have to be very careful how you dole out these things. Yeah.
The Frankenstein, mentality that he brought to life,
Mm-hmm.
was that the precursor to the mall, per se, or Macy's, or the start of that industry as well?
Yeah, it absolutely was. So he was at the nexus of so many trends, not only for women, but then commercially, our distribution systems, when shopping malls, with some really nice stores in them. So, Macy's used to be just in New York. They're on 34th. Saks used to be just on Fifth Avenue. Till we had these high-end malls where they would come and be the anchor stores the way they are in Cherry Creek. So he rode that wave, and so his designs could be in those stores where it wasn't, Walmart. It was very upper end, still very expensive dresses to buy, thousands of dollars, but not the single creation that a head of state or Princess Grace might wear, or Catherine Deneuve. You could have what she had for, thousands less. And he capitalized on that.
One more question. I'm curious to hear more about the relationship between the curator and the marketer. Because you talked about these atmospheres that were created that
Yes.
were choices that were made by the curator.
Absolutely. And I think it's really important that the curator and the marketer and that original person kind of be on the same page. They got to share in the vision. That's what makes for a powerful museum experience. You get it. It may be similar to the director, the actor, the playwright, kind of being on the same page. I mean, they don't always agree. They're hashing it out in these heated discussions and finding, well, what are you trying to communicate here? What are you really about? Here's how I see it. Here's how you see it. And somehow they work out this aesthetic vision. But it's got to be somewhat coherent to have that through line to really work. It's not easy to do. But these are examples of two that really worked. And that's why I'm optimistic, because we can do that. We can make this happen. Thank you.